First, I would like to invite Erzsébet Fitori, Group Head of EU Affairs and Relations at Vodafone Group, to take the virtual floor, and I would kindly ask all of our speakers to keep approximately 10 minutes time frame in order to leave some time for the questions at the end. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for the very kind invitation to participate in this extremely timely conference. It's a genuine honor to speak, even if only virtually, at the Houses of Parliament of Hungary. And it is also a personal pleasure that hopefully today I will be able to share with you some really new pieces of data and findings that we are launching today with regard to the gap analysis of the national recovery funds versus the political level of ambition with regard to digitalization. Please allow me to share a few slides with you in order to especially ensure that the data that I am trying to share is not far too overwhelming. Can you see my slide?
Yes, we can.
I'll try to go into slideshow mode. There were in particular four areas that I would like to briefly address, and then I would be extremely happy to discuss them later on. First of all, just to recall the level of political ambition that the EU has with regard to digitalization and what the key levers are. Secondly, the barriers that we must overcome together. Thirdly, the gap analysis, taking stock of where we are. And fourthly, the recommendations, how to close the gap. If we look at the level of ambition and the opportunity in front of us. I think Minister Varga said in her opening keynote speech that we see a once in a lifetime, a unique opportunity to take stock and perhaps to reset. And I couldn't agree more. The level of ambition is higher than ever. We have set ourselves the digital decade targets, which I will show you in a second in a bit more detail, but also we want to build back better. We want to take our citizens as well as businesses through the green and digital transition. The stakes are higher than ever because it's really the global competitiveness of Europe as a whole, the global competitiveness of European sectors, manufacturing, farming, agriculture, healthcare, that depend on the success of Europe. But I think luckily we have quite formidable tools to work with. Firstly, we have the Next Generation EU funding package, which is genuinely a once in a lifetime opportunity in financial terms. But we also have a unique opportunity to design policy tools. I have listed industrial strategy here, but not only the industrial strategy, it is also sectoral policy. It is also broader policies like competition policy, for example, which we have now the opportunity to design to serve the achievement of the goals. And I think more than ever, we have an opportunity to achieve the goals together in partnership between the public and private sectors. On this slide, you can see the four cardinals, the four set of targets of the digital decade, or digital compass, as Valentina has referred to them. Why are these targets so important to achieve? If you look at what is second on the list, secure and sustainable digital infrastructure, connectivity, gigabit for everyone, and 5G everywhere. This is basically the enabler, the foundation of the digitalization, without which the other goals cannot be achieved. And connectivity really has a changing role, and we have changing needs, as we could see in the very first panel. If connectivity is not of the quality, resilience, and security that we need it to be, we cannot even do our jobs anymore. We need a different kind of connectivity. It has to be high quality. It has to be on always. It's not best effort broadband anymore that we are talking about. It's clearly a paradigm shift with regard to these targets. And the second aspect of connectivity that I would like to emphasize is rural connectivity. We have to be enormously careful not to leave anybody behind. No business, no citizen must be behind. And we must be mindful that 30% of the EU citizens live in rural areas. If we do not address or prevent a new digital divide in gigabit and 5G from the outset, we risk a growing digital divide in the whole of the EU. The second element that I would like to emphasize is the importance of having adequate programs for SMEs. Why is it so important that 90% of SMEs reach at least a basic level of digital intensity? Well, because 90% of all of the EU's businesses are actually SMEs, because 2 of every 3 employees are employed by SMEs. And we have seen that those SMEs who have digitalized have on average 26% more revenues than those who haven't managed to digitalize. Overall, the opportunity is quite enormous. If every member state manages to improve its digital performance, Deloitte has calculated that it will lead to a 7.2% increase in GDP per capita, which is equivalent to 1 trillion euros. So what are the key barriers in order to achieve these targets? And sorry, I think that okay, I managed to go through. The key barriers are basically that the starting point of Europe is a difficult one. It's only 70% of SMEs who have successfully integrated digital technologies. But also, Europe has a massive and long-term investment gap in digital infrastructure, accounting to 42 billion euros per year. As the State Secretary has mentioned, we are behind our global peers, not only in the adoption of digital, but also in terms of infrastructure. Europe has 14% coverage of 5G versus 75%, for example, of the United States. And this is systematic, unfortunately, because there is a high level of skepticism by investors and the whole financial community, essentially, in investing in digital infrastructure. So how good use are we making of the recovery funding based on national recovery plans? We have asked Deloitte to analyze 20 national recovery and resilience plans and map them against the digital decade targets. And what we can see is that at the moment, on the basis of these 20 plans, 131 billion euros are dedicated to the achievement of the digital decade targets. If we break it down a bit, we can see that there is still quite a long way to go. And in particular, I will just highlight the infrastructure gap, which is, as I said, a key enabler of achieving all of the other targets, where we see that the national recovery funding, both from the RRF, from national sources, accounts to less than half of achieving the targets. And the other piece of information that I would like to highlight from the slide is what we see is that only about 10% of current SME digitalization spend is included in the national recovery plans. So what are our key takeaways? I think our key takeaways are that it is clear that there is a significant level of investment committed to digital transformation from the national recovery plans. And of course, the national recovery plans are not the only tool to actually meet these targets, but it's one of the most important ones. It is also clear that there is probably more attention, more detail, and more guidance needed to actually link the digital decade targets to digitalization. And it is also clear that recovery funding alone will not be enough to close the gap. The biggest potential gaps are in digital infrastructure, in ICT specialists, in the digitalization of SMEs. It is clear that much more private and public funding is needed in order to close these gaps, and additional measures are needed to close the gap, especially with focus on crowding in private investments. So what are our more granular recommendations to close the gap? There is need for further public investment, but also very importantly, policy reforms that encourage private investments and improve the overall health of the sector. When I speak of policy reforms, I mean it in a quite broad sense. It is both national reforms, national targeted measures, but also EU level reforms that are needed, both short term to kickstart the investment cycle, but also longer term structural reforms. Some examples are to remove deployment barriers, to facilitate infrastructure sharing and reduce duplication where this does not impact on competition. The State Secretary has mentioned the importance of scale in digital, and I think that that is also something that European telcos have been struggling with over the last number of years. We think that there is special attention needed to ensure that market structures, when it comes to digital infrastructure in particular, are competitive on the one hand, but are also sustainable in the longer term. It's very important that spectrum licensing encourages investment. And finally, we think it's of utmost importance that we subsidize 5G in rural areas, which are uneconomic to be covered from private funding, recognizing that 5G will drive a step change, both in quality and speeds, but also very importantly, for different kinds of modernizations of businesses and to prevent a digital divide. I will stop here for now, and I'm very happy to answer any questions that might arise. Thank you.